My name is Robert Stewart Bean. I'm a retired Air Force major, and I've flown many type of aircraft for the United States Air Force and the country of the United States, which I dearly love. I am going to tell you some interesting, I hope, stories that I have in the back of my mind, and I want to tell you there are many things that I think about when flying, and I had to wait quite a bit of time before I went to training in San Antonio, Texas. In fact, all my training was in Texas to many different fields.
So when you left Philadelphia and went for your training in Austin?
I went by way of Fort Bragg, and then San Antonio, and then many different fields in Texas. My father was a navigator and a machine gunner in the back of an old biplane, and his interest was mainly me. I was an only child, and but I suppose that I derived the interest in navigation from him. And I trained I went to training in I can't remember the exact date, but I went for training from Fort Bragg, North Carolina to Texas, and then took all my training at several different fields in Texas. The first one being San Antonio, which is ground school, and the next one was primary flying school, where we soloed aircraft. The next one was basic at Randolph Field, Texas, which was known as the West Point of the Air and still is. And then I went to Moorfield, Mission, Texas for my training as, in other words, it was honed. We had to learn a fly formation and many different things in the Air Force. And finally, before we got our wings, we had to fly. If your instructor recommended you and you wanted to, you could fly a P-40, and that in itself is a wild thing that I'd like to tell you about.
Please do. Tell us about the P-40. So you trained on the P-40, is that correct? You went from
we flew P-40s. You flew them, and here I go. Flying a P-40 was different because it was a single engine airplane, and nobody was in the other cockpit to correct our mistakes. We had to do it right the first time, which ended up like I ended up laughing, really, because the P-40 was a different type aircraft than any we'd ever flown. It was really complicated.
And why is it complicated?
It was complicated by the landing gear that folded back and up and moved at the same time. And when this happened, you had to hold the trigger down for the whole travel of the landing gear, and when it went up into the fuselage. And it sounds easy, but it's not an easy thing to do, because on the throttle on the aircraft there was a lock that you had to use to keep it from slipping back. Well, don't you know that mine did slip back? The tower is saying there's streaming black smoke, and I said, to hell with the tower. I'm not paying any attention. I got trouble here in the cockpit. So at the end of, I would say I was about a half a mile out, and I still didn't have everything under control, and the ground was coming up, and I scared the devil out of myself. So I got to do something quick. So I stopped fooling around and opened the throttle and got the hell out of there.
So how did that end up?
It ended up perfectly, because I made a perfect landing where the aircraft didn't crack up or hurt anybody.
Oh, that's great. So you went from flying, your first airplane was it T6s?
No, my first airplane was a PT.
PT-19.
PT, I think it was, is that what I said it was, a PT-19?
I think that's what it might be. It's an open cockpit two-seater, yeah?
Yeah.
It was a funny looking little plane, kind of.
That's right.
So you started with those in Texas?
Yes, we soloed this type of aircraft in Texas, and then we went to basic training at Randolph Field, and I got the oldest airplanes that we ever had and had to fly those, BT-14, which I wasn't too happy with. But I got through it, and I said, if I could fly that, I could fly anything, and that's my thoughts all the way through flying school.
Great. So then you graduated from those and went on to what?
What do you mean?
What airplane did you train with after that?
Well, I went to, then I trained on, I went to advanced flying school where we flew T6s, which is like a Cadillac. It was a Cadillac of the era, and we flew formation, and we were in a place called, we were in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas where they grew oranges. And on Sunday afternoon or any time I could get up there, I was up there and we could smell orange blossoms at 8,000 feet.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It's the truth.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful?
I hate to tell the truth.
Yeah. So now, at this time in your life, are you itching to get into the war? Are you excited, or what? How did you feel?
I was very much excited, and I was in with a bunch of people just like me, and we all had the same ideas, and we were great together.
So now, do you remember about what year this was in 41?
I graduated 43E, which was in June of 1943.
Okay.
That's when I got my wings.
Okay, so the war was in full throttle at that point.
Yes.
And you knew you were going to see combat.
Yes.
Almost assuredly, but you didn't know where you were going to go yet, right?
No.
Okay, so let's get back up to the P-40. Would have been the most souped up aircraft that you trained with.
Yes.
Right? That was the bad boy for training.
But I don't want to get the P-40 into it, because I flew a P-40 for a while, and then I said, I'm going to kill myself in this. I can't tell you. Well, can I?
Yeah, sure.
Huh?
Of course you can. This is your personal interview.
Wait a minute.
Tell us anything you want.
Let me think it out.
Well, I'm just trying to get a general timeline. So, once you left T6s, you went to P-40s, right?
Yes, in the Pacific. And
no, you were training in the States, though, with the P-40?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just flew it that one time.
Oh, okay.
And then we had to go around, fly the other aircraft, too.
Okay, but you weren't flying bombers yet. That wasn't in a part of the program yet.
No. And the reason I was flying bombers was because I knew I was going to kill myself. And I don't want to tell all that kind of stuff, you know?
Well, it's nerve-wracking. You know, another friend of ours that flew a P-51, his airplane was called Weary Willie. Yeah. Because he was weary the whole time he was up there, and he'll admit it. He said when he came down, his knees were shaking.
Well, that's possible. But
so not every guy's as hard as a rock up there, you know.
Oh, well, I wasn't either. It was as hot as the dickens.
Yeah.
In
the cockpit.
Down there.
So let's get back to, you were in Texas for you got your wings in Texas.
I got let's see, 1943. 43E was my class. So I got my wings, and then we got a 10-day leave, and we went to the Pacific.
And you knew before you left on leave you were headed to the Pacific, though? You got your orders?
No.
Not until you returned from leave?
Then when I came back from leave, they said, you're going to the Pacific, and you'll take part in the Pacific War.
So now, at this time, you're in the Army, though, right?
Yeah.
This is the Army Air Corps?
Yes.
And how did that news find you when you heard you were going to the Pacific? How'd that make you feel?
I got the news when I returned. When I returned to, let's see, what was the base? When I returned to Moorfield, Mission, Texas, they said, you're all going to the Pacific. Your bunch. The other group are going to Europe.
Okay.
So I ended up in the Pacific. They put us on a ship that shipped us to Hawaii.
Okay, so you left out of like San Diego, or where did you leave out of? Do you remember?
California, one of the California ports. I forget which one it was.
Okay.
And we went to the island of. We went to the Hawaiian Islands, and we started to fly again.
Well, when you arrived in Hawaii, did you go to Pearl Harbor? Did you see the damage from the attacks?
No.
No, okay.
No, I can't remember seeing it.
Okay. So when you got to Hawaii, what happened next?
Well, then we trained in P-40s for a while, And finally, because of something that happened down in the Pacific, because something that happened on the B-24s where they need co-pilots, which they did. They needed co-pilots because we lost one because the pilots were checking out and the aircraft crashed and killed some. So I proceeded to be transferred as a co-pilot in the B-24, and I'd never been a twin-engine pilot. And my navigator didn't want me on my navigator now, Shapiro was his name, incidentally. He didn't want me on the crew because he said I fooled around too much on the ground. Bean.
What? Bean, you were fooling around back then too, huh?
And he said, we don't want Bean on the crew because he fools around too. And then he got me on the crew. But the minute Shapiro saw that I could fly formation on a B-24, which I love formation flying, he was happy and I was happy. Everybody, the crew, was a happy crew after that.
So there were already B-24s staged in Hawaii by the time you got there.
Yes.
And what were they doing there though? Because they can't fly to a target from Hawaii, could they?
Yeah.
Where? Philippines? You can't reach that.
Fighting the Japanese.
There's a globe right there.
Formation flying, you've talked about it a little bit. What does that mean exactly?
When we approach an island-like truck, we usually get a lot of fighter interference. And they look like guys flying airplanes with flashlights coming at me. They were firing on our formations. And it was...
that must have been scary the first time you had an enemy encounter.
It was.
Tell us about the first time.
As well as I can remember the first time, I can remember we were all together flying formation, a close formation, so we'd use our protective firepower to keep Zeros away. And we were successful in fighting off. We didn't have too many. We didn't have any
losses
when we were bombing a truck. But we kept the heads down. I have many missions against truck just to keep them down.
So, but let's talk again about the first time that you remember seeing fighter aircraft coming in to take out your bombers. Do you remember that? Do you remember seeing the Zeros?
Yes.
And it was scary, I bet.
Yes, it was very scary, but we were all together, we were firing, all our guns were firing, and it didn't seem to bother me too much then.
So you kept on going.
Yeah.
Well, you guys had, how many bombers might have been in your formation at that point?
Most I've ever flown was 30.
30, okay.
And that was in the Pacific.
So now, what was your first primary target that was in combat for you? Truck was your first?
Yes, I've got a list of my targets. You'll see truck come up. You have it, I think.
Okay. So that's amazing. I didn't even realize that was your first combat experience was Truck Lagoon.
Maybe it wasn't truck. It was Woji or some other island that we just used as a practice.
Okay.
So, but that was our main target.
So before you entered combat, though, you had been dropping live munitions for practice, right?
Yes, but not too much. With smaller islands in the area, yes.
How would they train? Like, what would you be bombing?
Oh, just a little Coral Atoll. Maybe a few Japanese on it. We didn't know, but we were dropping our bombs on it.
Just to get rid of whatever was there.
Yes, just to practice.
Because the Japs were dug in pretty deep all across the Pacific.
Yeah, but these little islands that we used as training weren't too bad. They were milk runs, we called them.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but there was never a time that your B-24s were ferried on an aircraft carrier. They were flown everywhere, right?
Oh yeah, you couldn't ferry them.
Yeah. I thought maybe they would crane them onto a carrier and take them over there, but they were flown the entire way.
Yes, had to be.
And at this point, by Truck Lagoon, was there a B-29 in action at that point?
No.
It wasn't even built yet.
B-29 wasn't there yet.
Okay, so that came out two years later almost.
Yeah, more than that.
By that time you were there. So the Americans knew that the Japanese were held up at Truck Lagoon. What did they come out and tell you that?
What?
Your commanding officers, did they come out and say, hey, the Japanese are held up at Truck Lagoon and we got to go get them?
Yeah, well, we knew that they were always there.
You did?
Sure. I mean, just you could depend on it. And they had Zeros too.
Because that was their main port that they were working.
That was their Pearl Harbor in the Pacific.
Right. Exactly. So, how do you brief? Tell us about the briefing before you would go into a battle like that. Because let's say you had 20 B-24s in your mission. What would they tell you? Because the ships were lined up. They had what, recon pictures for you? Yes.
No, we didn't. I can't remember any pictures that they had, because unless the Navy PBYs would get them, and at the targets there was always a PBY that could help us, or a submarine. They called them lifeguard, and
they would be the guys to pick up any shot down pilots.
And in fact, we had one mission where the bombardier was getting rid of his bombs, and he went back. The narrow catwalk was only about 4 or 5 inches wide of the water, very narrow, and he went back to get rid of a couple of bombs that had hung up, and there were bombs that were high and there were bombs that were low. So he got rid of a couple. He started with a low one, and he went over to, he triggered the bomb so it would drop the one that was low. Then instead of going down and getting one low, he went and got the one high. It dropped off, and he and the bomb dropped in the Pacific Ocean.
He went with it. He was on your aircraft.
No, he was on a...
From your squadron?
Yes.
Well, that must have been awful.
It was.
So that kills morale a little bit when you get back home, huh?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, that's really sad, but you lost a lot of friends, I imagine.
Not too many. That didn't happen too much, because when the bomb went, it knocked the other bomb lower.
Right.
So.
Right. But as far as losses from your squadrons, did you lose some friends, and were any of the planes shot down?
Not too many. We didn't lose too many.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
You guys were lucky, because Europe was a whole nother story.
Yes.
Because they had the Germans over there. They were pretty gnarly.
Entirely different.
Yeah. So Truck Lagoon would have been the majority of your combat, or did you?
I think it was the majority of our combat.
Okay.
I mean,
how many times did you sortie there yourself?
About, let's see, I would judge about 32.
Wow. So that was a big campaign.
It was. That was one of our big campaigns to keep the heads down, you know?
Right, and that really did change the course of the war, actually.
It did.
So congratulations and thank you for your service, because those Japanese weren't going to give up.
I know they were.
They weren't going to give up.
They were tough.
Tough enemy. To the death.
Yes. Okay.
So now, what happened after Truck Lagoon? You guys were victorious there, and you sank, I think, somewhere around 100 and some ships.
We moved to the Marianas, and we moved to the Mariana Turkey Chute.
What's that now?
That was a big, the Marianas was closer to Japan. And we had to I forget the name of the doggone target, so I can't remember that. It's, what was it? Marianas.
Quadrillion?
No, it wasn't Quadrillion.
Well, what was the idea, though? The idea was that once we took out Truck and the majority of their Navy, we were looking to start to invade Japan at that point, so we were moving closer.
Closer, yeah. It was the Marianas Turkey Chute. That was what they called it, because they got enough power in there to call it that. And the Japanese, well, we flew a reconnaissance mission with the Navy, and we had one B-24 on the wing, and this was a Navy B-24 that had the cameras with it. So we asked them at the briefing. We said, well, at the briefing, they said, if we have problems, they're talking about this time. They're talking about the aircraft with the camera. If we have problems, you'll have to drop back to covers with your firepower. And I said, what happens if we have problems? He said, we're not going to drop back. So that went over like a lead sled. That's the truth.
Yeah, I believe it. Let me ask you one question about those formation flying that I didn't ask.
Yeah.
And if you guys are flying that tight and you have enemy aircraft coming into the zone, how do the gunners not hit your own aircraft? Because, I mean, aren't they tracking a fighter?
Sometime they did.
That's scary.
Not too much, but sometime they did. But we'd call our own fighters out, like Zeke at 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, wherever, by positions of the clock. That's what we used to do.
Right.
So we did the best we could.
Well, it must have gotten kind of crazy up there when all the guns started going off.
It wasn't too bad because
it was pretty controlled.
It was noisy anyway.
Yeah.
So you didn't.
That's true.
But the fire, like I was under the 50 calibers on the flight deck, and the machine guns are firing right over my head.
Must have been really loud.
It was loud.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
Did you actually ever witness any fighters being shot down?
Oh yes. Yeah, that was nice.
Nice, yeah. So you had escorts in the Pacific, though. Were they primarily Corsairs?
No, we didn't have no fighter escort ever.
Ever?
That I can remember.
I guess you didn't need them because there wasn't much ground fire. I don't know.
Ground fire wouldn't have made any difference. With the fighter aircraft, we would be worried about, but we didn't have any.
It was too far out there.
No.
They didn't have the resources to get the fighters to you.
They didn't have a way to get the fighters out there.
Right, okay.
And then when the P-51 came in, it was different. The P-51 had the range and the firepower and the wherewithal to get there.
Right.
The P-51 was great for us. It was great in Europe, too.
Sure was. Well, that's one of the finest aircraft ever made.
I flew it.
And of course, you have time on the P-51.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite airplane to fly?
If I had to go back to war tomorrow, I'd use the P-47.
That's your baby, isn't it?
Yes, because it has everything I need. I could fly. It weighs 7 tons, had 8 machine guns, and a handle like a Piper Cub.
Oh, you're kidding! With that big giant engine.
That's what you would talk to P-47 pilots, they'll tell you the same thing. Because I ferried a lot of them to the junkyard,
right,
Ridge, Arkansas.
Now, tell us a little bit about the difference between, say, that P-47 and a P-51 performance as a pilot. But what made the 47 better?
It made, if the P-47 could transfer all the weight that it had into speed, and it was rugged, it could take punishment. The P-51 could too, but not as much as the P-47. So that's what I say, if I had to fly a fighter, it'd be that.
And you think the agility is similar? You don't think the 51 outperforms
it?
it?
The P-51 must have it on the agility, as you say.
But the old jug is a tank, huh?
Oh yeah.
That's what you want if you really go into combat.
Yeah.
A lot of guys say that. They still say that, just like you.
Yeah.
So have you been to American Air Power over there in Long Island? That's Republic Airport where they were built, and the cover shot on the calendar, that's where that lives.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll take you up there sometime.
That should be great.
Yeah, you'd probably like that, huh?
Yeah.
All right, let's get back now. We want to get through, we're through truck now, and that must have felt pretty amazing to have taken out all those ships and truck. I mean, did you guys get back to the base that night and chat it up? What happened?
No, we dropped our bombs and got the hell out of there. That's what better about it too. But I know that a lot of shipping dropped down the bottom.
Oh yeah, like 160 ships.
People still keep telling us how many ships dropped down there, but I don't know that we wiped them out.
What's amazing is about Truck Lagoon right now is I'm a scuba diver, and the government there, that's I don't know if that's Palau or who actually owns Truck. I think it's part of Palau. Okay. They won't allow any of those artifacts to be taken out of there. So if you go and dive there now, you can still see the bodies. You can still see the bombs and the tanks and everything. It's still there. So that's a place I'd love to go. Yeah. But now, so there was no camaraderie when you got back to the base that night? You didn't go, hey, I sank this and I did this? And
I don't remember any.
Really? You weren't excited?
Yeah, we were a little bit. But then we moved into, in Guam, we moved into some new quarters and we built an officers club.
Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, that was interesting. The officers club was built by the Navy, really. And we had the liquor because we'd get liquor somewhere.
Because you had the planes.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
So all we used to do is hold the bottle, something like this, and the truck's loaded with the lumber for our officers club. We'd go by, we'd give them the lumber there.
Good bargaining tool.
Yes.
Sweet. And what were you drinking, whiskey?
I must have been, because I showed how I could jump off. I could jump off the little place that we had for the club or the building. I could jump right on all these beer cans without hurting myself. I was drunk, not drunk.
Yeah, I bet. Just briefly about the nose art and the beautiful pinup girls that we would see on the fighter planes and bombers in World War II. Do you remember seeing stuff like that? I know that you had dual sack was your B-24, right?
Yeah, see, now that was embarrassment to me. I had nothing to do with that.
Right, so you didn't commission that artwork, huh?
No.
But you do remember it was pretty unique to Americans that they were painting on the sides of their airplanes.
It made the guys feel good.
Right. Don't
ask me why. I don't know. I didn't feel good.
Well, it gave your plane some individuality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you were up in the sky, you look over, you probably ended up looking at what their painting was to recognize the guy, right?
Yeah.
Because there's dual sack over there flying.
Yeah. We used to refer, instead of number, we used to call them by their names too.
Right, which is pretty neat. But that was an internal thing amongst the squadrons, you know. But did you see that going on ever? Did you ever see the guys actually doing the paint jobs on the plane or anything?
I saw them painting the bombs on there and the missions on there, but I don't remember any of the girls they did.
Well, let's talk about the girls for a second. Now, back at that time,
yeah,
like Esquire magazine, you might remember, had the Vargas in it, and it had the Gil Evergreen, and those artists that were famous for the pinup girls. Did you take those magazines along with you and stuff? Did you pin those up in your locker or anything?
I have a big book at home somewhere that I can't find with all those on it. I'll get it for you if I can find it.
So do you remember that? Do you remember the guys used to pin up the pinup girls out of the magazine though, and did they put them in the squadrons?
Yeah, they did, but I can't remember too much. I was not too much involved with that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I like real girls myself.
You'd rather have a real girl than a painted girl on the airplane, right?
Yeah, I've seen it.
So let's talk about girls for a second. What was going on in your personal life back when you were in the Pacific? Did you have a girl back home or anything?
No, I didn't.
Single guy out gallivanting?
No, I didn't have. I had a couple of girlfriends, and the mothers had them all picked out for me to get married, and wasn't interested in that.
You weren't ready for that. You were too much of a wild character, right?
Well, not wild. I was interested in different things, like model railroads and stuff like that.
So when you were out there, were you always looking forward to getting home? Yeah. Were you lonely? Were you homesick?
Yeah, one time I didn't write my parents for a long time. They got the Red Cross after me.
They came looking for you, huh?
Yeah, they did.
Now, why was that? Was that just because you were fed up with everything?
My morale was down, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd been out there a long time.
Yep.
And I didn't get a scratch on me the whole.
Well, that's amazing, isn't it? That's fantastic, because a lot of the guys that did what you did never came home.
A lot of guys did not have it. And I read some books that scared the dickens out of me now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got to fly on a B-17 recently, and I felt very vulnerable up there.
Did you?
Yeah, I just couldn't believe there was virtually no protection.
Well, the B-17 was a lot better airplane. If we'd had B-17s, we wouldn't have lost many crews.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't have a lot of nice things to say about the 24, really.
No, I don't.
Yeah. But you were the monster that took it for a ride, I'll tell you that. I guess you made it work for you.
Yeah.
So what happened? Let's move on. Now, we're getting closer to what, 44 and 45 now, right?
I think, yeah.
Because when did the truck Lagoon go down? Do you remember? That's probably 43.
I can't remember that.
Okay, we'll take a look for that.
Okay.
But what happened after that? Where'd you end up going after that then?
After I finished my missions,
Yeah.
I was transferred back to the United States, and I went back to my old field where I took my flying training, and then they kept me there a month, and then they said, what do you want to do? The Air Force says, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to go back and fly fighters again. So they sent me to Mississippi, and I checked out the P-51, the P-47, any fighter I could check out.
So now I remember you telling me you wanted to get checked out in a lot of aircraft. It was just kind of a personal goal, right?
Yes.
So that you could say, hey, I'm an experienced pilot with all these different planes.
Yes, that's exactly, and I do that. It's up on the board down at Massey. You'll see that when you get down there.
Good. We look forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, you got yourself into the seat of a P-51. That must have felt pretty awesome leaving the 24.
It was awesome when I came back to land. Because I put the gear down, nothing happened.
Uh-oh.
So there I am with a P-51, something I'd never been in, and no landing gear. So the tower, I see all its equipment going out on the runway in front of me, and I reported I said, I can't get my left landing gear down, I think it was. And they said, well, go through the emergency procedure. Well, the emergency procedure, all it done was, you put the gear in the down position, leave it there, and just shake the tickets out of the airplane, and it drops out.
Oh, you're
Which
kidding.
happened to me, and it worked.
So you actually had to use gravity just to get it to go down.
Yeah, and plus shaking the airplane.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Boy, that must have been scary.
No, it really was. I said, well, heck, I can always get this thing when the ground's going to come down somewhere.
Now, did you guys had some training on how to bail out, right? Did you ever actually do a parachute? Did you ever? You never did. You never had to.
No, we never practiced bail.
But you had one every time you went out on a mission, though.
What?
A parachute.
Oh yeah.
Did you wear it during your bombing missions, or was it just there?
I kicked around on the floor because I would never bail out in the Pacific Ocean. That was just as dangerous as staying there.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, you got to jump into the ocean.
Right. Yep.
Loaded with sharks.
Yeah. So do you know how many planes were lost from your squadron out of the Pacific?
I don't know. We lost quite a bit. In fact, there's a book I want you to read. I'll get it.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So let's get back to your fighters though quick and just kind of run down, after you got into your P-51 and you put a few hours on there, what did they do with you after that? You said, I want to fly other stuff.
No, I didn't say that. I liked what I was doing. In fact, I took more P-47s to a junkyard than I flew P-51s, but I did fly them, but not much. In fact, if you look at my record, you'll see that happened. I flew more P-47s. And
so you were back in the States training on fighters by the time we dropped the nuclear weapon?
I was in the air at the time. I was flying a P-51 down in Mississippi, and over there they announced that they dropped.
What did they say to you?
No, it was just a general radio transmission. It says, we just dropped a bomb on. We knew damn well what happened.
But did you actually know about the weapon by that time?
No.
So nobody even knew what that meant yet?
No.
When they said drop the bomb, they didn't know what they meant yet.
I know. But they said they dropped one. Boy, everybody was up in the air. They loved it.
And then the end of the war came.
Yep.
And I guess you remember the end of the war? Do you remember that day?
No,
I mean, a lot of people must have been celebrating.
Yeah, they were, but I can't remember what I was doing.
You were actually flirting at the bar with some beauty, I bet.
I wish.
Did you have a favorite starlet back then? Betty Grable or anybody? Was there a favorite?
Humphrey Bogart used to say, here's looking at you, kid. Who was that?
That's right, here's looking at you, kid.
That's what I used all the time.
Did you? That was your favorite line?
You
still use it.
I'll try on some.